Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you've had a nice start to your week. Tuesday, that means Zach Hicks is joining the program at 11 o'clock. Always great to have him on. Always fun, always entertaining. And speaking of entertaining, I want to talk about the Colts and Indiana. And the Colts are not entertaining, at least not in a positive sense. I guess you could argue that the drama and things of that nature when it comes to the Colts are entertaining. But from an on-the-field perspective, watching the Colts is dull, boring, frustrating at times. And Indiana, it's a blast because you know exactly what you're going to get. The Colts are nothing short of terrible this year, while the Indiana Hoosiers are one of the best teams in all of college football. Very much looking forward to where the College Football Playoff Committee ranks them tonight. And Indiana this year has found a way to turn things around while the Colts have peddled in mediocrity for the last 8 years. And last night, as I was prepping for the show, I was thinking about this, and I was like, what's the difference? Like, why has Indiana turned things around while the Colts can't seem to figure it out? Like, what is the difference? Why is Indiana able to squeak out a win against Michigan while the Colts are struggling to close out close games? Why is Indiana blowing out bad teams while the Colts can't beat the Jags, who are awful, and they can't beat the Packers, who didn't have Jordan Love? You know, that's all the way back in week 2. Like, why are these things happening? Like, why is Indiana so much better than the Colts are? The Indiana football team and the Indianapolis Colts couldn't have more opposite seasons. Like, why is that? And as I was pondering on this question last night, I came up with 3 things. I think there are 3 key differences between Indiana and the Colts. And I think it speaks to why the Indiana Hoosiers are having success for really the first time in their history when it comes to football. And the Colts continue to struggle despite having a pretty decent history between Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning. Okay, like people that are alive and are Indiana fans and Indianapolis Colts fans, or people who just understand the landscape of college football and the NFL, know that the Colts have been relatively successful over the last, well, before the last 8 years. Really, they were highly successful, and then Indiana has been bad for forever. Like, why has Indiana turned it around while the Colts, who have a decent history of winning, they haven't been able to? What is the difference? I've come up with 3. I think there are 3 differences between Indiana and the Colts. There are differences in the amount of drama. The people at the top of these 2 different organizations are vastly different. And there's a difference in the understanding of the personnel on each of these teams. The Colts, as of right now, they're nothing but drama. Okay, this is like a middle school girls only class. Like, there's just drama everywhere. People are talking too much. There's complaining about other people. It's not great. Everyone's more concerned about who's playing quarterback as opposed to why they're losing games. You got captains saying that other guys aren't working very hard and that the preparation isn't there. And then you've got other captains, other important guys like Quentin Nelson. He said in his press conference yesterday that he doesn't really feel that way. People want to know why Anthony Richardson isn't playing and so on. Like when you sit down and you listen to these press conferences involving Shane Steichen, none of it is about what's happening on the field. Everything is about what's happening off the field. Why are your captains saying this? Are you seeing the same thing with the lack of preparation? Why isn't Anthony Richardson playing? Why haven't you gone back to Anthony Richardson? Why is Flacco still playing? It is nothing but drama. And it is dang near impossible to be productive in anything, at any place of work, a law firm, a doctor's office, a radio station, an NFL football team, an NBA basketball team, Walmart, wherever. It is dang near impossible to be productive at any place of work when there is nothing but drama going on. When you look at Indiana, though, you don't hear from anyone on that team. You hear absolutely nothing. You hear from Coach Cignetti, who's pretty tame for the most part. He's had two really quotable things this year, right? He had the Google Me quote, and at Big Ten Media Days, he was like, I've been predicting to finish second to last in the conference twice, and I've played in the conference title game both times, or whatever he said. Outside of that, you don't hear a peep from that guy. He just puts his head down and he goes to work, and his players follow suit. You don't hear a peep from those players either. Curtis Rourke went on the Jim Rome show yesterday. It's one of the more popular, sports radio shows, sports media shows, because they're on Twitter and all that in the country. I didn't know that until this morning. And I bet a lot of people didn't know about it. And here's the thing. You didn't need to know about it. I went back, I watched the interview. Curtis Rourke said nothing. There is no drama for that team. Now, if that team was, 4-6 instead of 10-0, would things be different? Probably. But as of right now, there's no drama on that team whatsoever. While the Colts can't seem to stay off the front page of the news for all the wrong reasons, Indiana isn't really talked about nearly as much as they should be, because there's absolutely no drama with Indiana. They just show up, they win football games, they go to class, they go to practice, they win again on Saturday, and then they just repeat the cycle. There's nothing extra going on with the Indiana Hoosiers outside of winning. While with the Colts, it's a lot of losing, and it's a lot of worrying about other things that don't have to do with football. And that is not a fun place to be. Okay, like it's not fun to work in a place as well where there's no trust in the people above you. That is the second difference between the Indiana Hoosiers football team and this Indianapolis Colts team. Okay, the players in Indiana clearly believe in Curt Cignetti, and of course they should. He's done nothing but deliver on his promise of winning. Okay, Curt Cignetti is clearly about winning and making sure that everyone in the IU football buildings are pulling in the same direction to ensure that happens. That is entirely different from what the Colts have going on. Now, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard clearly want to win. Okay, their jobs depend on their ability to win games. But I'm not convinced that Jim Irsay wants to win. At least not enough for the Colts to be successful. Okay, in the NFL, in a highly competitive league, you just wanting to win isn't really enough. You have to be crazy about it. And I'm just not convinced that Jim Irsay's crazy about winning anymore. One of my favorite stories about Jim Irsay is before the Colts won the Super Bowl against the Bears. He had Booger McFarland come into his office, a guy who'd played in the Super Bowl before, and Jim Irsay asked him all these questions about how is it different, because he knew that his franchise had never been there before, and he wanted for them to be prepared and ready for all the differences of playing in the Super Bowl versus playing in a regular season or a playoff game. And Jim Irsay just doesn't strike me as being willing to do stuff like that anymore. And when you look at, the history of the Colts over these last 8 years, there's just some interesting things that I think point to Jim Irsay not wanting to win. It is year after year after year of Chris Ballard not spending all the money that he can in free agency. It's a little fishy. People have floated the theory that Jim Irsay isn't allowing him to spend as much money. I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't know if this continues to happen. Then I think it's a fair question to ask. Irsay getting involved in the benching of Anthony Richardson, I think, points to not really caring all that much about winning. It points more to we want to have a good image, which is important. But look, if you want to win, you got to let the young quarterback develop at some point. Bringing in Jeff Saturday a couple years ago to be the interim head coach points to him not wanting to win. Jim Irsay is more concerned with the previous success of the Colts and putting players in the ring of honor than he is with winning currently. He's completely ignored the present. Look, if I had a boss that spent more time thinking about the former talent and the former radio hosts that he used to manage more than me, that I probably wouldn't be very good at my job, and I probably wouldn't have improved as quickly as I have. Okay? This is said all the time in sports because it's true. Everything starts at the top. Curt Cignetti is at the top of the Indiana program, and he is about nothing but winning. And that's a large part of why they win. Jim Irsay is no longer all about winning. Jim Irsay is all about honoring the past when the Colts were good. So while the Indiana Hoosiers win football games on Saturdays, the Indianapolis Colts put guys in the Ring of Honor as opposed to winning football games on Sundays. The last difference between Indiana and the Indianapolis Colts has to do with coaching. I like Shane Steichen. I do. I think he's going to be a good coach. I don't think he's necessarily a bad coach right now. I think he's just with a bad franchise. But Coach Cignetti has done a much better job in Bloomington in a shorter amount of time than Shane Steichen has done here in Indianapolis. The biggest difference is that when you watch Indiana on Saturdays, it feels like Curt Cignetti knows what he has. Whereas there are times where I watch Shane Steichen and I see some of the decisions that he makes, and I'm like, does this guy know who's on his team? Like with Indiana, I never feel like players are asked to do something that they can't. Just take the offense, for example. Curtis Rourke is great at the RPO reads. Like he just is. I feel like he never misses a read. That's why he's only thrown five. That's why he's only turned the ball over 5 times this year. He's thrown 5 interceptions. That's it in 10 games. Okay, because he reads RPOs well. And because he does that so well, what does IU do on offense? They run a lot of RPOs. Okay, the Hoosiers have multiple good running backs, so they run the ball a lot. They run the ball on average 38 times per game, and they only throw it 28 times per game. And of those 28, I'm willing to bet that 18 to 20 of them are RPOs because that is what Curtis Rourke is good at. When you watch the throws as well, everything is an easy slant, it's an easy curl, and then from time to time, they'll take a deep shot, and the deep shot is usually to Surratt because he's good at making contested catches, he's fast, and all those things. The play calling makes sense. What Indiana asks their players to do makes sense. It's never super risky because Curt Cignetti knows that they have an elite defense that can keep them in games. Everything that Indiana does makes sense in terms of how they use their players and what they ask them to do. Then you look at the Colts, and they do stuff like only give Jonathan Taylor the ball 5 times in the second half when he rushes for over 100 yards in the first half. That happened on Sunday, if you didn't know. You probably did because it was a major topic on Twitter. The Colts do things, or Shane Steichen does things like ask Anthony Richardson to throw the ball 30-plus times when they know he's not a great thrower of the football. And they do the same thing with Joe Flacco. While they have one of the best running backs in the NFL and Jonathan Taylor standing behind him, they're like, no, let's let the 39-year-old turnover-prone quarterback air it out 35 times. It just doesn't make any sense. The offense doesn't make sense. There are so many moments where I ask the question of like Coach Steichen, why are you doing that? Like, why are you calling a timeout to preserve some extra time to maybe get the football back when every time you've done it this year, it has led to the other team getting points because your defense can't get off the field on 3rd down? Stuff like this happens every single week. And at some point, Shane Steichen has to learn what he has. Okay, outside of that, defensively, I'm not going to gripe too much. The Colts give up a ton of yards, but they found a way to force turnovers and keep teams off the scoreboard, so I'm not going to complain too much about that. But that's another major difference. I never wonder why Indiana does anything. Everything that they do makes sense. While I find myself questioning the Colts' decisions during games all the time. Those are the 3 differences between these 2 teams, and it's why Indiana is 10-0, undefeated, trending upward, probably going to be ranked in the top 5 tonight. Indiana doesn't have drama. The Colts have a ton of it. Indiana has leaders at the top that care about winning. Jim Irsay cares more about the past. Indiana understands their personnel, and the Colts don't. That's why Indiana's undefeated, 10-0. One of the best stories in college football. And the Colts look like they're going to miss the playoffs. Big show today. Zach Hicks, he's joining at 11. We're going to talk Colts, why they're 4-6. What does the rest of the season look like? We're going to get into all of that. The Pacers, 5-5. They play again tonight. We're going to talk a little Pacers at some point, hopefully. College football playoff rankings come out. We're going to talk about those. And then, of course, it's Tuesday. So we're going to do Top 10 Tuesday at some point during the program as well. When we come back here in 4 minutes, I've got thoughts on the Pacers. They look good the other night against the Knicks. They're playing again tonight. So we're going to talk Pacers when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Welcome back to The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you've had a nice start to your week. Zach Hicks joining the show at 11. Can't wait to get his thoughts on the state of the Indianapolis Colts. Once again, that's coming up at 11 o'clock. Pacers play tomorrow night. They are off tonight. Sadly. Wait, no. Yes, they are off tonight. Yeah, they're off tonight. They play again tomorrow night. They're going, I believe, on the road. They are on the road to take on the Orlando Magic. Need to win that one. No Paulo Banchero, so need to win that one. But the best version of the Pacers showed up Sunday evening against the New York Knicks. Rick Carlisle took the podium after the game, and he had a very long-winded comment about the success of the Pacers. Here's Rick Carlisle after their win over the Knicks on Sunday.
What a game. What a great crowd. There's nothing like a bunch of pissed-off Colts fans to really make the atmosphere what it needs to be, for a game against New York. So happy that all those folks showed up, the ones that did. Tyrese was amazing in this game. I don't know if I've ever seen him more determined in a regular season game than this one today. Ben Mathurin was absolutely, breathtaking. Efficient, tough physically. I thought one of the biggest plays of the game was the tip in he had in the fourth quarter. That was a huge momentum play, and so that was great. Miles, obviously, with his shot making in the second half was great, and he's got a big responsibility guarding Towns, and I thought he did a real solid job on him. So. A lot of guys played really well. Worth in right now, but the guys off the bench know their jobs and know their roles. Enrique Freeman knows his job is to keep it simple and guard his butt off and rebound. Quentin Jackson knows his job is to hound whoever he's playing defensively and just keep the game simple. And then Furphy did some good things in 4.5 minutes. And I thought Walker made a big difference in this game in the second half. In the first half, he just didn't have the kind of impact he's capable of. In the second half, he made a big jump there, and that was key.
Rick Carlisle right there talking about the Pacers win on Sunday. Halliburton, finally himself. Finally. Praise the Lord. 35 points, 11 of 18 shooting, 4 of 10 from 3, and 14 assists. Also went to the free throw line 11 times and hit 9 of them. That's the guy who was third team All-NBA last year. That's the guy the Pacers want to build around. Now, look, I don't expect him to go for 35 and 14 every night, but he looked good. Probably should have had more assists than what he did. Guys miss some open shots, but hey, that happens sometimes. But the best thing that I've seen from Halliburton as of late is how well he has just attacked the rim. Once again, he took 11 free throws. That's not what he normally does. Okay, but he's a good player inside the arc, and it's nice seeing him attack the rim. A lot of times, I think he gets in this bad habit of when he's going one-on-one, whether he's got a big or another small guy on him, he just kind of is looking for his step-back three, which is fine. But when you're shooting 25% from beyond the arc, like Halliburton was going into that game on Sunday, I would like it if you got to the rim a little bit more. He did that on Sunday. It was important. He played great. Love seeing him get to the rim. And look, like just seeing the ball go through the basket is nice. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to get downhill and to get to the rim, hit some free throws. And then from there, he found a rhythm. And obviously he shot 40% from 3 in that win. And then, of course, the guy that everyone was talking about Sunday night and Monday morning is Benedict Mathurin. He just continues to impress everybody. The dude's just wired to score 38 points, 8 rebounds, 13 of 18 shooting, 7 of 9 from 3. I remember watching him his rookie year. There's never any question about his ability to get to the rim and draw fouls and do all those things. It was the question of, can he shoot the ball? And he shot the ball really well just to start this year. So Mathurin just continues to ascend and become a better player. Like Pascal Siakam didn't have to be great in this game because of who Mathurin and Halliburton were. And that's important, like to have guys who can relieve one of the better players from time to time. Obviously, the more guys the teams have to worry about, the better chances you have at winning going forward. Miles Turner was good as well, 26 and 6, defended Karl Anthony Towns the whole game, which isn't easy. If you just look at the box score, you're like, Karl Anthony Towns played great, so the defense must not have been that good. No, I thought Miles Turner defended Karl Anthony Towns well. Karl Anthony Towns is just one of the better basketball players in the world, and he got his. I think the most impressive thing, though, as good as Mathurin and Halliburton and Turner were, was the contributions off the bench. Like the scoring wasn't there. TJ McConnell didn't play a ton, but the bench was still productive, especially on the defensive end of the floor. Enrique Freeman played a little bit. He rebounded and did a good job of contesting shots. Furphy played, 4.5 minutes, but rebounded and defended. And then you got Jarris Walker, who played 27 minutes. As Carlisle said, first half, not pretty, took some bad shots, missed some open ones. Defense wasn't as good as it could have been. But in the second half, man, he was really good, right? He had a couple shots, passed the ball well. But the most impressive thing was the defense. They're like, you know what? Let's put this 6'8" athletic dude on 6'1" Jalen Brunson and see what happens. And look, it's Jalen Brunson, one of the better players in the NBA. So he didn't just like shut him down, but Jalen Brunson really struggled to score. And I think that Jarris Walker being the number 8 overall pick, people have this expectation of star. And that's just, it's just not a fair expectation. Like when you look at the history of the NBA draft, most great players are picked first, second, or third overall, right? And then from that point on, you don't really know what you're going to get. If you get a good role player or a starting caliber player, then like that's a good draft pick. And that's what Jarris Walker looks like he's going to be. He looks like he's going to be a solid play defense and knock down some shots guy. He's good with the ball in his hands too, but when you're playing with Halliburton, Mathurin, and Siakam, like, you just aren't going to have the ball that much. That's just the reality of it. So I thought he looked good as well. The NBA as a whole, just still really, really weird. Interesting game tonight. Klay Thompson makes his return to Golden State, which is cool. The Cavaliers are 12-0. They're one of my favorite teams to watch. 5 out, but they're cutting. And like I said, they're a lot of fun to watch. But Pacers still have the 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, and they're 5-5. Every other team in the Eastern Conference has a losing record. And then you look out west, every team, the Mavericks are in 11th, and they're 5-5. Okay, so the top 10 teams in the Western Conference all have winning records. Meanwhile, the East is just really bad. No other way to put it. Coming up tonight, we've got the college football playoff rankings coming out. And I'm going to tell you right now, the most correct college football playoff rankings, if the committee's rankings aren't the same as mine, then they're wrong. It's just as simple as that. Number 1 has to be Oregon. I think that's self-explanatory. Big win over Ohio State. They've crushed bad teams. They've beaten good teams like Ohio State. And undefeated in the Big Ten, one of the better teams, or the best team in the country. Dylan Gabriel has played incredibly well for Oregon, and they fixed some of the defensive issues that people were worried about to start the year. Number 2, Ohio State. They beat Penn State on the road. That's an impressive win, even though I think Penn State's a wee bit overrated. And their one loss was on the road by 1 against Oregon, the number 1 ranked team in the country. Ohio State, arguably the best roster in the country. They've got a good coach. They've got a solid quarterback. They're loaded talent-wise on defense. Ohio State should be the number 2 ranked team in the country. Number 3 should be Texas. They don't have a signature win, but I've seen them play. They're incredibly talented. They've beaten bad teams badly. And if you've seen them play at all, then you would understand why I have them ranked 3rd. I know they lost at home to Georgia, but Georgia's one of the best teams in the country as well. Number 4, people won't like this one. I think Tennessee should be ranked 4th. And it's pretty simple for me. I think Tennessee's just better than Indiana and Penn State. And I think that their win over Alabama proves that. That's better than any win that Indiana has, and it's better than any win that Penn State has. I know they lost at Arkansas, but it's pretty simple. I think that they're just better than Indiana and BYU because I saw them beat Alabama, who is still one of the better teams in the country, despite Alabama being down from who they usually are at this point in the season. If you wanted to put Indiana or Penn State or BYU in front of Tennessee, I would get it. But if the goal is to rank the best teams and rank them in order from best to worst, then I think Tennessee has to be 4th. Number 5 is where I'd put Indiana. 10-0. They've crushed every bad team that they've played. Got some concerns after the Michigan game. The offense struggled big time against Michigan. That's the first time Indiana's played a team that is just as talented as they are, and it wasn't pretty. They found a way to win, though. Being 10-0 while playing in the Big Ten, no matter what your schedule is impressive. And that's, the most important thing. Do you win football games? And for Indiana, the answer to that question is pretty clearly a yes. Number 6, I'm going to put BYU here. BYU should be ranked 6th. At some point, resumes have to matter. BYU has wins over 2 ranked teams, SMU and Kansas State. Like, that has to matter. Honestly, like, I think Indiana is better than BYU, which is why I have them 5th and BYU 6th. But, like, BYU has 2 impressive wins. But with that being said, I don't love BYU. Like, I know that they're undefeated. Some people would say that they shouldn't be because of what happened on Saturday night. The controversial holding call. I'll be honest, I thought it was a hold. The guy calling the game thought it was a hold. Either way, that's not why they won. Utah still had a minute and a half to stop BYU after that call, and Utah didn't score a single point in the second half. So that's why BYU won, because they shut Utah out in the second half, not because of some holding call that was probably a hold. So I would have BYU ranked 6th. Number 7, here's where I have Penn State. They're 8-1. And unlike Indiana, they have not crushed the bad teams that they've played. They barely beat Bowling Green. They lost to Ohio State at home. Now, that's not a bad loss, but that game didn't feel close. Maybe this is my bias against Penn State showing, but I just don't think they're as good as any of the teams in front of them. Like, if they played BYU, I think BYU would win. If they played Indiana, I think Indiana would beat Penn State. Penn State just isn't a top 6 team in the country. I think they're 7th. They're talented. Their defense is incredibly impressive, but offensively, like, they just aren't that good. And college football is very much an offensive sport. And if you can't put up points against better teams, and we saw them score 6 against Ohio State, then you're not going to beat the better teams in the country. For context on that Penn State stat, they scored 13 points. 7 of them came off of a pick 6. Their offense just wasn't good enough to generate points against that Ohio State defense. Number 8, this is where I put Alabama. And I really wanted to put them higher. They have more ranked wins than any other team in the country. When you look at the AP poll, they have 4 wins against ranked teams: Georgia, Missouri, South Carolina, and they just crushed LSU in Baton Rouge at night on Saturday. There isn't another team in the country with as many ranked wins as Alabama. I believe no other team in the country has more than 2. That should be rewarded. Alabama's played a pretty tough schedule this year. Obviously losses at Vanderbilt and at Tennessee, but having 4 wins against ranked teams deserves to be rewarded. Alabama, I have ranked 8th. This is a team that's still good enough to win the whole thing. I thought they came out and they had a real identity against LSU on Saturday night. They're like, you know what? We're just not going to. We're done throwing the ball. Jalen Milroe, you're going to hand it off and you're going to run it yourself, and we're going to run for a gazillion yards, and it's going to be really impressive. And it was. So Alabama at 8, we've got Notre Dame at 9. Wanted to put them higher because they've improved over the course of the season. but the entire season has to matter. That's why we play week 1. That loss to Northern Illinois cannot be erased. It can't be. Like, that is something that has to be brought into consideration. Okay, they are clearly much better since then. They've got a couple good wins. They beat Louisville and they beat Navy, which is cool. But that loss to Northern Illinois can't really be ignored. It's the worst loss, I think, of all the teams that are ranked, definitely of all the teams that are ranked in the top 12. So, that has to cost them something. So I'm going to put them at 9 behind Alabama, who not only has more good wins, but the losses aren't as bad as Notre Dame's one loss to Northern Illinois. Number 10, Ole Miss. They beat Georgia, which isn't easy to do. They have another win over ranked South Carolina. The offense speaks for itself. It's Lane Kiffin. It's Jackson Dart. They're going to put up a boatload of points. Doesn't really matter who they play against. And that defensive front is one of the best in the country. It's one of the best that money can buy. And Ole Miss forked out the money in the offseason to have that defensive front. And look, if they make the playoff, which it looks like they're going to, then it'll be worth every single penny. Number 11, I've got Georgia. They, to me, have the most impressive win in the country. They went into Austin and beat Texas. Okay, everyone who knows Georgia's schedule knew that they would lose some games this year, right? And their tough schedule just continues on Saturday when they play Tennessee. They already went to Texas. They went to Ole Miss. They went to Alabama. At least this game against Tennessee is at home. Okay, so this is still a good team. The regression from Carson Beck is concerning, but if he can figure it out, this is still a team more than capable of winning the whole thing. When it comes to playing teams in the playoff, I think Georgia's the last team anybody would want to play in all seriousness. And then number 12, I have SMU here. Miami's probably going to get this spot, but Miami doesn't deserve to be in the top 12. SMU's best win was against SMU's best win was against Louisville, just like how Miami's best win is also against Louisville. The difference in why I have SMU ranked in front of Miami is that SMU's one loss came by 3 to BYU, while Miami was a double-digit favorite over Georgia Tech, and they lost. SMU has the better loss. I think they're really good, really talented. That's why I'd go with them for the 12th seed as opposed to Miami. So that is the most correct college football playoff ranking that you will hear today. I just do lists on Tuesday. Like we just rank everything on Tuesdays here on the Real Jonathan Smith Show. I've got Top 10 Tuesday when we come back here in 4 minutes. Zach Hicks, he's joining the show here in about 20 minutes to talk Colts. Always fun when Zach joins the show, but we've got Top 10 Tuesday coming your way when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you guys are having a nice start to your week. Top 10 Tuesday. We do this every Tuesday, the 10 best teams in the NFL after week 10. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Zach Hicks joining me here in about 17 minutes. We're going to talk Colts and all that fun stuff. Coming in at number 10, I've got the Washington Commanders. They're 7-3. I've had them higher usually, but after their loss on Sunday, they are now 0-3 against teams that are over 500 on the season. Now, they're still a good team. They have an opportunity on Thursday night. They're playing the Eagles. If they win that, then obviously that'll be a win over a team that has a record over 500. So there's still opportunities to kind of change the narrative. But as of right now, they haven't beaten anybody good. 0-3 against teams over 500. Okay? I'd like to see them beat somebody good. I haven't seen them do that yet. The offense is still awesome. Jaden Daniels is still the best rookie quarterback in the NFL. The defense is much improved from last year. They just can't seem to beat a good team for whatever reason. I want to see them do that before I rank them higher than 10th. Number 9, making their first appearance on Top 10 Tuesday this year, the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals are currently sitting atop the AFC West. They're a good team. 6-4. Kyler Murray's playing well. They've got weapons. Trey McBride. It's one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Marvin Harrison Jr. has been impactful as a rookie. They can run the ball. They're second in the NFL in yards per carry at 5.2. And when you can run the ball and you have a good quarterback and you have a couple of good weapons on the outside, then you're going to find a way to score points and you're going to find a way to win games. Defensively, they're doing a good job of forcing turnovers. They're forcing about 1 turnover a game. They are great in the red zone. I mean, one of the best red zone defenses in the NFL. Teams score a touchdown less than half the time when they enter the red zone against the Cardinals. The field goals, not touchdowns. That's how you win in the NFL. The Cardinals do that. I've got them at number 9. Number 8, I've got the Los Angeles Chargers. And I think I've had them on once before, really early in the year. They're 6-3. And there's just a lot to like about this team. Everything that's wrong with the Colts, the Chargers seem to have figured out. This team has an identity. They have a good coach. They have a great quarterback. All 3 things the Colts don't have. The Chargers run the ball. They play good defense. 2 other things that the Colts don't do. And Justin Herbert is good enough to make plays on third downs to keep drives alive, and he makes plays in the red zone that allows them to put points on the board. Now, they'll never be one of the best teams in the NFL, this year at least, because they just don't have the weapons that you need to do that. But they don't beat themselves. I know that they're going to run the ball. I know that they're not going to turn the ball over. I know that they have a good quarterback, and I know that they have one of the better defenses in the NFL. It's hard not to like them. I've got the Chargers at number 8. Number 7, I don't like this. I really don't. But I've got the Eagles here. Maybe they're just so talented that Nick Sirianni being their head coach doesn't matter. Jalen Hurts playing some of the best football of his career. Saquon Barkley, it's one of the best running backs in the NFL. He's got to be just overjoyed to not be with the Giants anymore. When Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown play together, they just seem unstoppable on offense. Defensively, they're young, but they've gotten better as the year has progressed. Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, they've really kind of helped shore up the back end of the Eagles' defense. Quinion Mitchell, the best rookie in the NFL, no one is really talking about. They started getting after the quarterback. They're 10th in the NFL in sacks per game. All those guys from Georgia finally quit speeding and started getting after the quarterback. That's helped them out quite a bit. They're playing the Commanders on Thursday Night Football. That game should be a lot of fun to watch. Number 6, I've got the Green Bay Packers here, and this might be too high, but I like them. I do. There's so much about the Packers that is impossible to ignore. They didn't play this last week. Hopefully Jordan Love comes back healthy. He's got that groin issue. When he's 100%, obviously the Packers are better. But this should be one of the best teams in the NFL. They have a good defense. They've forced a ton of turnovers. They can run the ball with Josh Jacobs. And they have a bunch of good receivers. Like, you don't know who wide receiver 1 is because they have so many good ones. I think Matt LaFleur's a good coach, but Jordan Love has just turned the ball over way too much this year. Like, the Packers should be one of the 5 best teams in the NFL. I think they're the 3rd best team or the 2nd best team in the NFC. Like, this is a team that should have Super Bowl aspirations. The issue is Jordan Love doesn't know how to not turn the football over. And if that gets cleaned up, then the Packers will be good enough to beat anybody. That's how talented they are. That's how good of a coach they have. And that's how good Jordan Love can be when he's not turning the football over. The Green Bay Packers are the 6th best team in the NFL. Number 5. I don't like this one either. This one, they could be too high, but like, I've seen enough from them to feel comfortable putting them here. I've got the Pittsburgh Steelers 5th. Ever since they switched to Russell Wilson, they have been so much better on offense. And if you ask Colts fans, would you rather have Russell Wilson or Justin Fields as the starter in Pittsburgh, they would all tell you Justin Fields because his completion percentage is 67% in the 6 games that he's played. Meanwhile, when you look at Russell Wilson, it's only at 58%. Well, Jonathan, if Justin Fields has been more efficient and he's completed more passes, why are the Steelers better with Russell Wilson? The yards per game are way up, and he's hitting on these deep, explosive plays. We saw the deep one that he hit to Michael Pittman, to Mike Williams. George Pickens made a great touchdown grab. Like, Russell Wilson has been great at throwing the deep ball. It has put more explosiveness in the Steelers offense, and they're good at running the ball. Like, Najee Harris is having one of the better years of his career. Warren can carry the football. Cordell Patterson, he can carry the football. Like, they are much improved since starting Russell Wilson. And, I don't have to talk about the defense because everyone knows how great they are on that side of the ball. Everyone knows how good that defense is. But with Russell Wilson, they've just kind of gone to another level. They're 3-0 with him as the starter. He's making throws downfield. The Steelers are scoring a bunch of points. They're averaging over 30 points per game since starting Russell Wilson. And when you score that much and you have the defense that the Steelers do, you aren't going to lose very many games. So I've got them at number 5. Number 4, the Ravens. And look, a lot of people have the Ravens higher. A lot of people would say that the Ravens are the 3rd best team in the NFL. I don't. And the reason why I don't have the Ravens higher than 4th showed itself on Thursday Night Football against the Bengals. The pass defense is awful. Like, it cannot be worse. It really can't. They do everything else well, but you aren't going to beat the Bills. You're not going to beat the Lions. You're not going to beat the Chiefs with this bad of a pass defense. And I can hear some people right now, oh, but they beat the Bills 35-10 earlier in the season. The Bills have gotten better, and they added Amari Cooper. Keon Coleman has improved. So, like, if the Bills played the Ravens today, I would take the Bills every single time. Okay, the offense is great. Lamar Jackson's great. Derrick Henry fits in incredibly well there. But the pass defense can't be ranked last. Like, look, it doesn't have to be the best pass defense in the NFL, but you can't be last. And that's where the Ravens are at right now. They give up more passing yards per game than any other team in the NFL, and that's problematic. It's incredibly problematic because when you play Josh Allen or Mahomes or Goff in this, Lions offense, like, you have to be able to stop the pass, and the Ravens simply haven't done that all year. Number 3, I've got the Bills. The defense played well Sunday. They forced the great Joe Flacco to turn it over 4 times, and when you do that, you win games. Their run defense is still a little suspect, although I will say I thought it was better on Sunday against the Colts, aside from the 58-yard run that they gave up to Jonathan Taylor on Sunday. The Colts only averaged 2.8 yards per carry. It's pretty good. Pass defense has been solid all year, and they have Josh Allen, who made a couple great plays during the fourth quarter Sunday. He was fine through the first 3 quarters, but the fourth quarter, he made a couple big plays to kind of put the game away, and that was without his 2 best wide receivers, Keon Coleman and Amari Cooper. C.J. Stroud, you can win without your 2 best wide receivers. The Bills just did it on Sunday against the Indianapolis Colts. Number 2, the 2nd best team in the NFL, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm finally doing it. The Chiefs are not the best team in the NFL. I have a new rule. I'm going to call it the 2024 Miami Hurricane rule. If you play enough close games, eventually you're going to lose. Okay, that's what happened with Miami in college football. They're barely beating everybody, and then they play Georgia Tech, a team that's not as good as them. And because it was close, they finally lost. Eventually, Miami played in a game, and they couldn't get out of the hole that they dug themselves. It's going to happen to the Chiefs at some point. I get it. They're 9-0, all that good stuff. But the point of my rankings isn't to reflect record. It's to tell you who the best team in the NFL is. And the Chiefs are not the best team in the NFL. The best team in the NFL doesn't trail in 8 of their 9 games. That's what they've done this year. They've trailed in 8 of their 9 games, and they figured out how to win all 9. And that just isn't sustainable. It's just not. You're not going to block a game-winning field goal attempt every single Sunday like they just did. Chiefs are good, best team in the AFC, probably going to win the Super Bowl. But as of right now, they are not the best team in the NFL. It is the Detroit Lions, and they looked bad on Sunday night. But it was, I think, their most impressive win of the season. Sure, they've blown out multiple bad teams, but they beat the Texans on Sunday Night Football by 3, despite Jared Goff throwing 5 interceptions. They scored 26 points, even though they turned the football over 5 times. They held the Texans scoreless in the second half. I don't care if they didn't have Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. That's still impressive. And that's what good teams do. Great teams figure out ways to win when their quarterback turns it over 5 times. And that's what the Lions did. They're tough. They can run the football. Jared Goff was bad on Sunday night, but he's been good every other game this year. So the Lions, that is the best team in the NFL. I thought what they did Sunday night was incredibly impressive, winning that game, even though they played horrendously bad. That is why I have them as the number 1 ranked team in the NFL. When we come back here in about 5 minutes, Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, he's going to join me. We're going to talk about another Colts loss and kind of where they go from here. Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts joins me here in 5 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully your week has gotten off to a good start. It probably has if you ignored what the Colts did on Sunday. Speaking of the Colts, it's Tuesday. It's 11 o'clock. Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts joins the show. Zach, what's going on, man?
Oh, nothing much. Just chilling, enjoying my 3-game losing streak for the Colts right now. No complaints, I guess.
So, it's no secret. The offense hasn't been great over these last 3 games. Really, through the whole season, it's really struggled. So I woke up this morning and I had an idea, and I want your opinion on it.
Okay.
Is the Colts offense so bad that they should hire Shane Waldron as a consultant to help make the offense better?
It might make it worse. Honestly, I don't know. might help bring it down to where you need it to be to get a top pick. I mean, that might really help right there. But I mean, look, the offense is in a bad place. I think one thing we keep saying over on Locked On Colts this year is just there's just no identity with the offense at all. Like, you would think with Richardson and Taylor early in the season, you'd want to be this really run-heavy, run-dominant type team that can really just pound the rock and be, up there with the Ravens of the world and stuff like that. But instead, they tried to be very explosive, pass-heavy, and kind of abandon the run in a lot of games. And they were really inconsistent with that. And then now with Flacco, they got a couple explosive runs this past week, but it wasn't really an identity for them in this game. Like, outside of the 3 explosive runs, the run game was putrid. And then, Flacco, I don't think we have anything identity-wise with what he does on the field. I mean, turns the ball over, I guess, is his identity at quarterback right now. So there's just no flow. There's no energy with this offense. There's no, what's the thing they can lean on when they have a gotta have it type of moment? What's the thing they can lean on? Last year it was RPOs. Last year it was Jonathan Taylor at times. Last year it was, stuff like Gardner Minshew running backwards out of the pocket and throwing it behind his back and maybe hitting a receiver. Those things kind of worked for the offense. This year, I don't if they have a 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6 and a gotta have in moment, what are they going to? I have no clue. Maybe it might be A.D. Mitchell now after this past game. I don't know. What do you go to? I have no clue. So, this offense has no identity, has no rhythm, has no anything, and it's so bad to have that when you have a offensive-minded head coach as the guy leading the way on offense. You really can't have a season like this when it comes to your offense, and it just keeps getting worse every single week.
It really does, and you talked about and I watched the Steelers and the Commanders on Sunday, and I'm sitting there. I'm watching the Steelers offense with Russell Wilson, and I'm just like, isn't this what the Colts offense was supposed to look like this year? Like, with Anthony Richardson at quarterback, run the football, and then from time to time take some sort of deep shot. And like that, I think that's what a lot of people expected. And like you said, that really wasn't the identity. It was, let's throw the ball 35 times with a young and inexperienced quarterback who's not super accurate. And then that didn't work. So they were like, I guess it's his fault. Let's bench him. And now they're going to Joe Flacco, and things have gotten worse. And not even just on the field. Joined by Zach Hicks, host of Locked On Colts. Kenny Moore and Zaire Franklin had some interesting quotes after the game on Sunday, questioning people's preparation and effort and urgency. What were kind of your thoughts on what they had to say after the game?
Yeah, I will say my first thought was it's kind of interesting that it came from defensive players. Like, maybe they are pointing the finger at players on offense, but for me, when I take that, I think defensive players pointing at other defensive players. And I'm like, you guys were fine again. You guys were good on defense. I have no issue with what the defense did in this past game. Sure, they could have, been a little bit tighter in some areas, especially on that final drive. They just allowed too much, and the Bills went down and put that game away. But for the most part, the Colts defense was a pretty big positive in this past game against one of the best offenses in football. So maybe they were pointing at the offense, which, yeah, I agree, man. The offense is a mess right now. Point everything that you have to at the Colts offense, but Yeah, it was really interesting overall, though, hearing those comments because obviously it's nothing that you want said to the media and out there, talking about effort and talking about individual effort because it seemed like they weren't really even harping on, like coaching not getting guys ready, more so guys not doing their part to properly study the film, properly get ready for games, and mentally get ready to where they need to be on Sundays. So it was more so calling out their teammates and calling out other players than it was calling out the coaching staff. Even Quentin Nelson, I think, expanded upon it yesterday and said, like, no, Shane does a great job of getting us ready. It's just we need everybody on the same page and everybody going. And look, part of that is on the head coach, obviously, but also these are grown men that are being paid to play a sport. They need to do their part to also perform on the field and get ready for these games. And I think that's kind of what these comments were saying. So, yeah, it seems like a really messy situation. I do think, when you kind of set the standard of your organization these past 9 years under Chris Ballard or 8 years, whatever it's been under Chris Ballard, of as long as you're adequate and you were a draft pick of this team, you're going to get extended and you're going to get good money because we like to keep our guys. And I mean, look, 2022 happened and they basically have the exact same defense and majority of the same offense since that 2022 season where they were one of the worst teams in football. How many teams do that, where you kind of just run back everybody 2 years later with a new head coach, entirely new coaching staff. And you still have 16 of the 22 starters, probably like 15, 16 of the 22 starters from a 4-win team. It kind of builds this complacency of like, you're not going to be held accountable for poor seasons and poor moments and poor games and stuff. You're going to always get extended. So I do think some of that complacency comes from the status quo of this front office. I also think, again, at the end of the day, when you're a grown man being paid to do a job, it's also on you to get ready and do your thing. And I will say one thing for sure is, Kenny Moore, it's interesting that he's the one who say all that because if there's anybody who's been playing lights out this year on either side of the ball, it's been Kenny Moore. He's been fantastic. Now, he's a risk taker at times and he gets beat. Like, he's not perfect, but he's a fantastic player. Fantastic player. The interception he made on Sunday was an otherworldly play from a slot corner. So when he's calling out other players, he'll take his own faults and talk about his own mistakes, but he's also calling them out from a point of like, I'm doing my job. You guys need to step it up. And honestly, I can't blame him whatsoever.
I can't either. Joined by Zach Hicks, host of Locked on Colts. You can get that podcast wherever you get your podcast. He and his co-host, Jake Arthur, they do a really good job. So I feel like I've just ripped Joe Flacco all week, and I'm going to ask a question where it feels like I'm ripping him again, and part of me feels bad, but the other part of me is like, Dirk, don't turn the ball over 4 times, and maybe, I won't have to do this. Do you look? Maybe this is the way that Joe Flacco's always been. But every time he comes off the field and they cut to him sitting on the sideline, I feel like he doesn't care. Like, he's got like his arm up and he's got this blank facial expression. Do you think does the body language bother you, and do you think it bothers the other players?
I'm sure it could, and for all we know, maybe that's who the players are talking about. Was talking about Joe Flacco, this 40-year-old quarterback who isn't doing the proper preparation to get ready for games. Because look, he's a 40-year-old man who probably didn't expect to be in this type of role, and look, he didn't sign on to this team to be the starter, so maybe he's not going through the prepreration. I'm not trying to source anything or put anything out there. I'm just saying that maybe that could be who they're talking about here. But yeah, body language has never been a huge thing for me, but I will say maybe it's his way of having that short memory as a quarterback, which I know is a very important aspect of playing quarterback, is come off the field reacting the same way to interceptions as you would to touchdowns, and make sure that you don't ride the highs or the lows too much and get too down on yourself. I don't know if that's the professionalism that the Colts want and Richardson to get, is like, just come to the sideline mopey after everything and you'll be good to go. But yeah, I'm not too crazy about the body language thing. I'm a little more upset about the 4 turnovers and like the 8 turnover worthy plays that he had in this past game. But yeah, it's just not a great look, obviously, with everything else going on with this team. It just kind of compounds to, the Kenny Moore comments, the Zaire Franklin comments, the overall play on the field, and just, again, the lack of desire from anybody to see Joe Flacco on the field right now, aside from, I guess, Shane Steichen and some other people in the Colts organization. Those are the only people who want to see him on the field. I don't even know if he wants to see himself on the field right now. So, yeah, it just kind of compounds to this weird situation we're in where every Sunday just feels like a slog, and like we're waiting until we can get past it, whatever moment we're in with this Colts team, and it's brutal to watch right now. I mean, they were getting booed for most of the game.
Yeah.
Their offense was getting booed for most of the game. And honestly, I don't blame the fans for it whatsoever.
Yeah.
When you throw that bad of a pick six on the first play, and then the next drive you throw a pick on a screen, I completely understand booing that offense.
Yeah.
It's so bad, man. It was so bad to watch.
It really was. Joined by Zach Hicks, host of Locked On Colts. I think the thing for me, and I'm willing to bet that other fans, I think, echo this frustration, is whenever Shane Steichen is asked, why is Joe Flacco still the starter? The answer is because he's a veteran, right? And my thing is like, if you've been in the NFL for 17 years, and part of the selling point is this guy's seen every coverage, there's nothing he hasn't seen. Why is he throwing 3 interceptions? Like, why was he so bad on Sunday? Was he misidentifying coverage, or was he just like not seeing guys? Like you, I know you go back and you watch the all 22, the film and all that. Like, why was he so bad on Sunday?
It's honestly a combination of things, and it's kind of crazy too, because aside from the 7 turnover worthy throws that he had, so I know I'm putting a big asterisk there, but aside from those 7 awful throws, he was mostly seeing the field well, and credit to Shane Steichen. I think this was his best called game of the season. Honestly, for me, I thought he had a great game plan to attack this Bills defense. He was able to get explosive runs without having the thing that makes his run game work. He was A.D. Mitchell was open all day long. Part of that's because A.D. Mitchell was running great routes, but they were isolating A.D. Mitchell and using him. Alec Pierce was fantastic in this game. Josh Downs, aside from the drop touchdown, was open all game long. So it was a game plan that had guys open. And aside from those 7 plays that Flacco had, like, he was seeing it pretty well. But on those 7 plays, it was a combination of, the first one, I don't know what he's looking at on the first one, that the slot defender is clearly dropping there. He didn't put enough oomph on it to get it to Josh Downs. I don't know what he was thinking or seeing or anything on that one. The second one, when you get pressure in your face on a screen, you got to just kill the play. I don't know why he's forcing the issue and trying to get that ball to the screen still, because your best case scenario is like a 5-yard loss on that play. Your worst case is throwing an interception like you did. So just a dumb mistake. Some of the other dropped interceptions were just ones where, again, you got to read the leverage of a defender. You can't just push the ball in there, especially when you don't have the arm talent that you had when you were 20. Like, I don't know what he's trying to do on a couple of these plays. The near pick in the red zone when he was targeting Josh Downs, the linebacker was on that all the way. It's just, there's no reason for it. The other near pick to Taron Johnson in the third quarter was a simple like hitch route over the middle on an RPO. And again, it's one where the Bills defense already saw it, the slot corner sitting on top of it. Why are you throwing that ball? And then when you go to the Alec Pierce pick near the end of the game, again, just how are you missing Alec? Alec Pierce can catch anything within an 8-foot radius. This guy has insane hops, insane hands. We saw him in the Jacksonville game go up there with one hand and pull one down. Just get it within 8 feet of the ground and he's going to catch it. And he still threw it 9 feet up, 10 feet up in the air. And the announcers were hilarious. They were trying to blame that one on Pierce. I'm like, look, I get it. We all like Flacco. He's an old man that we've all seen play for a while. But if Alec Pierce can't get up there and get it, then it was definitely like 10 feet above him. But yeah, it's just stuff like that, man, where it's like, what do we do? Like, this is not a standard that we can live with on some of these plays. I don't know why he's forcing some of these. I don't know what he's seeing on some of them, and then just clear misses like the one to Pierce. It's just bad quarterback play. And when you don't give me the extra stuff, like, again, with Richardson, you can kind of live with the misses because he gives you the QB run game element. He gives you a good rushing attack. He gives you explosives. When you're Flacco and you're just kind of this dink and dunk quarterback who can kind of get it to the intermediate game, you can't be forcing the issue and making mistakes like this because you have nothing to build up my offense again. Like, your big selling point is protecting the ball and moving the offense. if you're not protecting the ball and you're spotting the Buffalo Bills 13 to 17 points in a game where your defense is playing pretty well, you have no chance at winning the game. I mean, this loss ultimately, like, not to oversimplify it, but it really came down to just a bad quarterback performance, a really bad quarterback performance. And that's why the Colts lost this game. So, yeah, it's hard to justify him still being the starter after a performance like this, because they were right there with this Buffalo Bills team if Flacco was just not turning the ball over. But he constantly tried to give the ball to the Bills so many times where it's like, this is just a dreadful quarterback play.
It really was dreadful. Like, maybe I could have done better. I don't know. I mean, if they want to hold some open tryouts, I'll get out there. I'll throw it around a little bit. Joined by Zach Hicks.
I wouldn't have got many yards positive, but I wouldn't have turned the ball over. I would have got the ball from under center. I would have just fallen down. We would have punted every single time, but no interceptions at least.
Yeah, seriously. Joined by Zach Hicks, host of Locked on Colts, talking Colts and that awful loss against the Bills. And just based off of everything that you said from Flacco there, I'm assuming we're going to be on the same page with this. I felt like every other part of the Colts team played well. And like, obviously, aside from Flacco, like the defense I thought was great. They ran the ball. It wasn't super consistent. Like, if you take away the 58-yard run by Jonathan Taylor, they averaged only like 2.8 yards per carry, which isn't great. But
right.
Like, when you have those explosive runs, like, that gives you opportunities to score. And like that for me is more frustrating than like all the Flacco picks. It's everyone else played good enough for the Colts to have a chance to win that game. And then this 17-year veteran who, as you said, we're told is playing because he doesn't turn the ball over, even though when you look at his career, his touchdown to interception ratio is 2-1. So that doesn't really even make sense. Like that for me was the most frustrating part. Do you feel like the other aspect of this Colts team played well enough to win?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go as far as to say the Colts absolutely win if he doesn't commit any of those turnovers, because at the end of the day, if you're in a one-score game with Josh Allen, there's a good chance he's going to go down there and score. He's that good of a quarterback. But if all of those interceptions or interceptable balls were just balls that he threw in the ground or took sacks on even and just held on to the ball, it's probably a one-score game, if not a Colts victory in this one. Their defense was playing well. They were forcing turnovers. They got off the field on a fourth down early in the game. They were forcing field goals in the red zone. They were doing everything that you could possibly do with a not great defense against Josh Allen to give your offense a chance to win. And what they got in return was, again, Joe Flacco spotting the Bills 10 points out the gate. I mean, we were hardly 6 minutes into the game and the Bills had 10 points, and I don't think anyone was blaming the defense. Like, it wasn't the defense's fault. I mean, 7 of those points directly came on a pick six. And then you just had other opportunities where, again, missed throws and near interceptions, and that forced the Colts to take field goals and stuff too. Like, there were so many opportunities for this team to win. And I'm not saying that every player on the team aside from Flacco was perfect. I mean, again, Josh Downs dropped a wide open touchdown. Salves was certainly not great at left tackle and had his fair share of struggles. The defense, again, they were good for a majority of the game, but that final drive was pretty messy. And that drive before the half, they could have been a little bit better with their tackling. So it's just not a perfect game by this team, but it was certainly enough to go toe to toe with the Buffalo Bills. This was not a game. I mean, it was a 17-point game before the Colts' final drive. And it certainly didn't feel like that. But I mean, the Colts team was playing just as well as the Buffalo Bills team. And even with Josh Allen having a down game, he was by far and away the better of the two quarterbacks in this football game. So, it really came down to the quarterback play. And by in turn, the person who made the decision to put him out there, which is Shane Steichen.
So there is a positive. I try really hard to be positive, Zach, because no one wants to hear that their team sucks all the time. Like, that's not fun to hear. Joined by Zach Hicks, host of Locked on Colts. But AD Mitchell was awesome. That is by far the best game he's played on, not 90% of the snaps after only playing 5 snaps the previous week. That being because, Michael Pittman Jr. got hurt and he needed to step up, and he did. Was targeted 6 times. He had 6 catches for, I think, 71 yards. Like, I thought like that's definitely the best game he's played. Why was he so good?
Yeah, I mean, first to say, I was terrified when he fumbled on his first target that we were going to pull him from the game and we were going to get Ashton Doolin the rest of the game. So I'm glad Josh Downs came in and recovered that. But after that fumble, he was really good. And you can still see with him that there are still some issues when it comes to just everything besides route running with him. There's still, again, the fumble, they're still tucking the ball, they're still creating after the catch. But I was really impressed with this game with how he separated, how he got open, how the Colts used him, and how he was attacking the ball in the air. I mean, there were at least 2 or 3 of his catches in this game where if this was week 2, he either wouldn't have gone up and got it, or it just would have fallen to the turf because he wouldn't have been able to scoop it up. But he was going after the ball. He was coming back to the football. His route running was fantastic in this game. Honestly, it's actually really cool. I think if people go back and watch it, they'll see what I'm saying with here. It's going to sound crazy when I say it, but he looks a lot like T.Y. Hilton on the football field, just much bigger, obviously. And just the way that he goes from 0 to 100 off the line so quick. He is so fast, so explosive off the line. And when it comes to his route running, it's not that he's this super precise, like perfect route runner, but he uses that speed so well and he doesn't waste any steps to where he's running these like deep speed outs and he's running these deep comeback routes. And because he's just so fast and doesn't waste any movement, he's able to get to those landmarks so quick without corners being able to react. I mean, he had 2 third down catches, I believe, in this past game against Christian Benford, who I know that's not a name that every fan is familiar with, but Christian Benford's been one of the best corners in football this year. He is a fantastic young player for the Buffalo Bills. And the Colts isolated A.D. Mitchell against Benford on a couple third downs in this game and said, go win your route against a really good young corner in Benford. And Mitchell was able to do that. He was able to do it pretty easily, too. I mean, one of them, Benford smacked the ball out of his hand as he was going out of bounds, but because he created so much separation, he got enough steps in to where it wasn't even looked at by the booth. So, yeah, A.D. Mitchell, man, I really think, like, it's not fully there yet, but he's getting there. He's really close. He's open on almost every single route. He's very fast, very fluid, and I think the double move hit is coming here soon, too, because again, when you keep hitting teams with all those speed outs, with the amount of like fluidity that he has, it just takes one step going upfield and you can create that double move. So I think an even bigger game is coming later this season for A.D. Mitchell, as long as the quarterback play obviously is good enough to get him the ball. But really, really great showing. And hey, maybe it shows that when you have a 21, 22-year-old young player who's going through some rough patches, maybe the best thing you can do is just keep playing him and hopefully he figures it out on the fly. I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? You know, getting a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, there's just more playing time and seeing what they can do with it. I mean, crazy how that works, right?
It really is. Joined by Zach Hicks, host of Locked on Colts, talking the Colts lost to the Bills. What are your thoughts on Shane Steichen at this point? I still like him. I don't think it's his fault that he's playing 39-year-old Joe Flacco. I don't think it was his decision to bench Richardson. I don't think it's his fault that Richardson only completed 44% of his passes. I don't think the roster as a whole is great. I don't think that's really his fault either. So I still think that there's room for him to prove that he is a good coach. What are kind of your thoughts on him at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I still really like him as a play caller, and I do like a lot about him, but this year has kind of been a year from hell for him. I mean, there's just not been a lot going right. A year that was supposed to be about developing Richardson has led to a very public benching. And again, he's not the perfect guy to be the face of it, you know, because he doesn't say much to the media. So when you're winning games and when it's, you know, even if you're like a 500 team and you don't have this kind of controversy, it's fine to be like, you know, push away the media and kind of be very blunt and cold with the media. But when you make decisions like this and the media is up there doing their job and asking you questions and trying to hold you accountable and you kind of push them away, it feels very arrogant, it feels very disjointed, and it feels very immature. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing with Steichen, where I'm not saying that he is a very immature guy or anything like that, but it very much appears that way optically. So the optics have been really bad this year. Obviously, when you have a bunch of players coming out and calling out other players for their individual preparation, as a head coach, that falls on you regardless. I mean, it falls on the GM too for bringing the players in, but it falls on the head coach because it's your job to get everybody ready and everybody in the right mindset. And if everyone's not in that mindset, they shouldn't be playing. And again, maybe that's the Richardson thing that we're not being told, because we don't know what's fully going on with Richardson, and Steichen's not going to be the one to tell us. So yeah, it's a lot of things right now with Shane Steichen that just don't look good for him. And it really matters what's going on behind the scenes, and how much of this was on him, how much of this was on other parties, how much of this needed to happen. Like, we don't have the full story right now. All I can say is optically, this year has been about as bad as it could possibly go for Shane Steichen. But there's still a chance to salvage it a little bit. They have a couple big games coming up. I don't know how many of these games Joe Flacco will start for, but he is at least the starter of this next game against the Jets. But if they can salvage some wins and get to a decent place, and maybe they're able to get something going with Richardson in the offseason, you can still salvage it a little bit, because I don't know if anyone gets fired if they go 7 or 8 wins this year, because that's just not Irsay's MO. He usually needs it to be like a disastrous season for them to get fired. And despite how doom and gloom we are with them sitting at 4-6, I still think they're probably good enough to win a couple of these games down the stretch and get to around 7 or 8 wins. So I don't know if Steichen or Ballard will be gone this offseason, so they'll have another last chance to get it all right. So hopefully for someone like me who still likes Steichen and thinks that he can be a good head coach, hopefully whatever's happening behind the scenes can even out and they can figure something out. But optically, it's been about as bad a season as it could possibly be for a second-year head coach. And a guy that everybody was excited about last year is now someone where a lot of people want him replaced. And honestly, I don't disagree because of how bad the optics have been this season.
Yeah, I totally understand it as well. Joined by Zach Hicks, host of Locked On Colts. 2 more questions for you, and I will let you go. At what point do we have to just come out and say that Gus Bradley's done a good job this year? Because the defense has been the best part of this Colts team so far.
I'll say it right now, man. I mean, since that Jacksonville just disaster, and that's what I've kind of been referring to that game as, the Jacksonville disaster, he's been a really good defensive coordinator. Like, I'm not going to say he's up there with the Brian Flores of the world and like a top 5 or a top 10 guy. Like, he still has some issues. And I think the Khalil Shakir third down screen was certainly on Gus Bradley, and one that he would have liked back. But I mean, when you're looking at this defense, I kind of put it on Twitter yesterday, but they have 2 real difference makers. And that's kind of it. Just 2 guys who are plus difference makers, and that's DeForest Buckner and Kenny Moore.
Grover Stewart's
not
on that
that
list?
much to go on. Sorry, who was that?
I said Grover Stewart isn't on that list. I feel like he's just been really good this year.
Yeah, he's really good. I wouldn't say he's a difference, but he's fantastic at what he does. And he was a difference maker in that Vikings game, obviously with that one big play. But he's a fantastic run defender. Very like a B+ type player. But if we're talking like A players at their job, I would say Buckner and Kenny are your 2 A players. Grover's probably your 3rd best defender at like that B+ range. Okay. He just, like, again, you have a gotta have it type play on like a final drive or something. The 2 guys you're looking at are Kenny and DeForest, are your 2 guys. And you know, when you're kind of looking at this defense, you have linebackers who are very hit or miss. You know, they're fine in the run game. It could be better in the run game, and have some moments in pass coverage, but overall not great in pass coverage. You have a secondary that's kind of hanging on by a thread aside from Kenny. Like, they just don't have true difference makers in the secondary besides Kenny. And then a pass rush that's pretty solid, but still not perfect. Like, just has some young guys that are still, you know, getting to where they need to be. And a good blitz package, I think, is what Gus has too. But he's kind of making it work. You know, he's changed from a cover 3 guy to a cover 2 guy a lot this year. They're mixing in a lot of really cool blitzes and sim pressures and changing that up a lot to create opportunities for his defense. And they've been really good at forcing turnovers. They've really changed their identity from this team that wants to suffocate you a little bit to, hey, we'll give up some yards, but we're going to punch that ball out. We're going to jump underneath passes. We're going to be aggressive, and we're going to stand tall in the red zone. And it's worked for them. So, yeah, man, I'm at the point where I'm going to say Gus Bradley has been pretty good positive this year for this team. I think you can really look at these last 4 to 5 weeks now for the Colts, and Gus Bradley might be one of the biggest positives on this Colts team. He's been really, really good, and he's giving them chances in these games against true. I mean, these aren't even just playoff teams. I mean, the Vikings and the Bills are like near top of the conference teams that you're talking about here. Even the Houston Texans, who are in a little bit of they're kind of sputtering right now, but they're still a pretty solid team. They've had chances to win these last 3 games because of Gus Bradley's defense. So Gus Bradley, man, I'm pretty happy with the job he's done this year, and he's constantly changed and surpassed my expectations. I'm not saying he's perfect by any means, but very, very impressed with Gus Bradley this season.
Yeah, he's been good. Last question for you, Zach, and I will let you go. Any hope left for this team this year, or are you just kind of at a point where you're like, let's get to a point where they can't make the playoffs so we can see Richardson again?
I don't know if there's like no hope, because again, there's still a path. It's basically like them, Cincinnati, and like Denver for the final playoff spot basically right now. And the Colts don't have the craziest final stretch of games compared to, like, I think Cincinnati plays a lot of divisional games. I'm not too sure who the Broncos play, but the Colts play the Broncos, so they kind of control their own destiny in that game. But yeah, it's not hopeless in terms of making the playoffs. It's probably hopeless in terms of doing anything after that. But yeah, it kind of feels like a regular Colts season outside of 2018 or maybe 2020, since I've covered this team, where it's like you're getting to the final stretch, and regardless of where your positioning is, I feel like everyone's kind of checked out because we know how the season's going to end. This could be 2019 where you're most likely missing the playoffs, or this could be 2021 where it looked like you were going to make the playoffs, but you didn't. Like, it's kind of just the same type of vibe though, regardless, where even if we did make the playoffs, we're not going anywhere. Like, it doesn't really matter that much. I would love to see playoffs, but each week it seems like that's probably not going to happen. So yeah, it's kind of indifferent. It's kind of where this team has taken me, and I think taken a lot of fans, where you kind of get indifferent around like mid-November every single year, because you kind of understand what kind of team you got there, and it's not really much that's going to compete for anything.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Zach, thanks for your time, man. You were great as always.
Of course, buddy. See ya.
So that is Zach Hicks. Follow him on Twitter at Zach Hicks. Check out his podcast, Locked On Colts. He writes and covers the Colts as well. When we come back here in about 3 minutes, the difference between the thriving Indiana Hoosiers and the suffering Indianapolis Colts will be explained when we come back here in about 3 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks to Zach Hicks for joining me in the last segment. He does a great job, as always, talking Colts. And I want to keep rolling, talking about the Colts. I also want to talk about Indiana football. The Colts are terrible this year. Meanwhile, Indiana is one of the best teams in all of college football. Indiana has found a way to turn things around while the Colts have just pedaled in mediocrity for the last 8 years. What's the difference? Like, why is Indiana able to squeak out a win against Michigan while the Colts struggle to close out close games? Why is Indiana blowing out bad teams while the Colts can't beat the Jaguars, who are awful, and they couldn't beat the Packers in week 2 when Jordan Love didn't play? Like, why are these teams why are they just polar opposites? And as I was pondering that question last night, I think there are 3 differences as to why Indiana is finding success this year while the Colts continue to struggle to turn things around. And the 3 things are, there's differences in the amount of drama. The people at the top are vastly different. And there's a difference in the understanding of personnel between the Colts and the Hoosiers. Okay, the Colts right now, like they're just nothing but drama. You got captains talking about how players aren't preparing, and everyone's concerned about who's playing quarterback. People want to know why Anthony Richardson isn't playing, and so on. Like when it comes to the Colts, like nothing there is about what's happening on Sundays. And it's hard to be productive at any place of work when there's a ton of drama going on. And when you look at Indiana, you don't hear anything like that. You don't hear from anyone on that team except for Coach Cignetti. Curtis Rourke, starting quarterback for the Hoosiers, went on the Jim Rome show yesterday. And I'd be willing to bet a lot of people didn't know about it. And that's a popular sports radio show. And guess what? You don't need to go watch that interview, because Curtis Rourke doesn't say anything in it. He doesn't say anything of any substance. It's just a bunch of, unquotable lingo. That's all it is. Meanwhile, the Colts can't seem to stay off the front page for all the wrong reasons. Indiana isn't discussed nearly as much as they should be. And I think part of that's because there's no drama with Indiana. There's nothing extra going on with the Hoosiers aside from winning. While with the Colts, it's a lot of losing and it's a lot of worrying about drama. And that is just not a fun place to be. Like, you're not going to be successful at anything when that is all that is going on. Okay, like that's not a fun work environment to be in. And it's even worse when there's no trust in the people above you. I think that's the second difference between Indiana and the Colts this year. Like, the players and the coaches that at Indiana obviously believe in Curt Cignetti, the head of that football program right now. And they should. The dude's done nothing but show up and deliver on his promise of winning games. Curt Cignetti is clearly about winning and making sure that everyone else associated with IU football is pulling in the same direction to ensure that winning happens. That's completely different from what the Colts have going on. Now, I don't want what I just said to be misconstrued. Shane Steichen obviously wants to win. Chris Ballard wants to win because their jobs depend on winning. But I'm just not convinced that Jim Irsay wants to win. At least not enough for the Colts to be successful. Year after year after year of Chris Ballard not spending all the money that he can in free agency, it's kind of weird. Okay, some people have floated the theory that Jim Irsay is why Chris Ballard doesn't spend that money. Jim Irsay getting involved in the benching of Anthony Richardson points to not wanting to win. Bringing in Jeff Saturday a couple years ago to be the interim points to him not wanting to win. Jim Irsay is more concerned with the previous success of the Colts and putting players in the Ring of Honor and reflecting on the Peyton Manning years than he is with winning right now. He has completely ignored the present. And if I had a boss that all he did was care about the past, then, I probably wouldn't be very good at my job. And the state of the radio station probably wouldn't be in a great spot if all that my boss did was care about the past. But he's very much invested in the right now, and so things seem to be going well. Okay, look, this is said all the time in professional sports because it's true. Everything starts at the top. Curt Cignetti is at the top of that Indiana program, and he's about winning and what's happening there. They are winning a lot of games. Jim Irsay is about honoring the past when the Colts were good. So instead of winning football games on Sundays, the Colts just put more players in the Ring of Honor. That is a major difference between the Colts and the Hoosiers. The last difference is coaching. I like Shane Steichen, but Coach Cignetti has done a much better job in Bloomington than Steichen has done. The biggest difference is that Cignetti understands what he has. While there are times where I watch the decisions that Shane Steichen makes, and I have questions of if he knows what he has. With Indiana, I never feel like players are asked to do something that they can't. Okay, like Curtis Rourke is excellent at the RPO stuff. So Indiana runs a lot of RPOs. The Hoosiers have multiple good running backs, so they run the ball on average 38 times a game, and they throw it only 28 times a game. And once again, a lot of those throws are RPOs because Curtis Rourke is good at that. And every throw that he makes is an easy slant or it's an easy curl. And from time to time, they'll take a deep shot, usually to Surratt because he's a bigger receiver that's good at creating separation down the field and going up and making contested catches. Like the play calling makes sense. It's never super risky because Curt Cignetti knows that he has an elite defense. Everything that Indiana does makes sense in terms of how they use their players and what they ask them to do. Then you look at the Colts, and they do stuff like only give Jonathan Taylor the ball 5 times in the second half after he ran for over 100 yards in the first half. That happened on Sunday. They do things like ask Anthony Richardson to throw the football 30-plus times when they know he's not a great thrower of the football. And they've done the same thing with Flacco. They've got one of the best running backs in the NFL standing behind Joe Flacco, who struggled a bit. And it's like, nah, we're going to throw it anyway. Defensively, I'm not going to gripe too much. The Colts give up a lot of yards, but they've kept the scoring down and they've kept the Colts in these games. That is another one of the major differences. Like everything Indiana does just makes sense. They never ask players to do more than what they're capable of. While with the Colts, I feel like offensively, they do that all the time. Those are the 3 differences between these two teams. Indiana doesn't have drama. The Colts have nothing but drama. Indiana has leaders at the top of their program about winning. The Colts have a leader in Jim Irsay who cares more about the past than he does the present. Indiana understands their personnel, and it doesn't feel like the Colts do. And that's why Indiana's undefeated, and the Colts look like they're going to miss the playoffs once again. When we come back here in about 4 minutes or so, the college football playoff rankings come out tonight. I'm going to tell you what those should look like when we come back here in 4 minutes.
More winners, more often. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice day. College football playoff rankings come out tonight. I'm going to run through mine really quickly. These are the most correct college football playoff rankings. Number one has to be Oregon. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. Beaten bad teams by a lot, and they obviously have that win over Ohio State, who should be ranked number 2. They beat Penn State on the road. The one loss was on the road against Oregon. They only lost by 1. They look good. They're talented. They passed the eye test. They passed the important win test with that win on the road in Happy Valley over Penn State. I think 1 and 2, incredibly easy. 3 and beyond is where it gets kind of tough. Number 3, I have Texas. They don't have a signature win. That is, if that's your pushback on this, then hey, I get it, but I've seen them play. They are incredibly talented. They've beaten bad teams badly. Like, if you watch them, I think it's pretty evident that they are a top 3 team in college football. We're just kind of waiting on them to grab that signature win. Number 4, I've got Tennessee. People won't like this, but that's okay. The reason why I have Tennessee in front of Indiana and Penn State is because they have that win over Alabama. I know they lost at Arkansas. That loss looks worse and worse as the weeks go on, but I also know that they're better than Indiana and Penn State based off that win against Alabama. Like, that is more impressive than anything Indiana and Penn State have done. So I'm putting Tennessee there at number 4. Number 5 is where I have Indiana. 10-0. They've crushed every bad team that they've played with the exception of Michigan. I've got some concerns after that game. They struggled, against a team that's just as talented as they are. And they found a way to win, though. And that's the important thing. But I've got some more. I've got some legitimate concerns about Indiana after watching them play in that game against Michigan. But look, they're 10-0. They're in the Big Ten. You deserve to be ranked really high if you're 10-0 in the Big Ten. Number 6, we've got BYU. Like, resumes have to matter at least a little bit. BYU has wins over 2 ranked teams, SMU and Kansas State. Like, that alone is probably evidence that they should be ranked in front of Indiana. I just think Indiana is better than they are just by watching the 2 teams play. I don't love BYU, but they're undefeated. Some people would say that they shouldn't be because of the holding call Saturday night. I thought it was a hold. Either way, that's not why they won. BYU won because they held Utah scoreless in the second half. And even after the holding call, Utah had a minute and a half to stop BYU, and they couldn't. So that's why they won. Number 7, I've got Penn State, 8-1. Unlike Indiana, they haven't crushed the bad teams that they've played. They lost to Ohio State at home. That's not a bad loss, but that game didn't feel particularly close. If, the Ohio State quarterback doesn't fumble the ball through the back of the end zone, then Ohio State crushes Penn State, and people don't feel nearly as good about them as they do. Number 8, I have Alabama. They have more ranked wins than any other team in the country when you look at the AP poll. They have wins over Georgia. That's a good win. Missouri, South Carolina, and they crushed LSU on Saturday night. There isn't another team in the country with as many ranked wins as Alabama, and that should be rewarded. That's why I have them at 8 instead of Notre Dame, who I have 9th. Notre Dame has the worst loss in the country, and while they have gotten better since that loss, like, you can't just erase it because they've gotten better. It still happened. Every week of the season should matter. Okay, so while they're clearly better now than what they were at the start of the season, you can't ignore the loss to Northern Illinois, who's been bad in the MAC, and that's why I have them 9th behind Alabama. Number 10, Ole Miss. They beat Georgia. It's not easy to do. They have another ranked win over South Carolina. The offense is electric. They went out in the offseason and bought the best defensive line money can buy. It paid off. That's a large part of why they beat Georgia. And if they make the playoff, they'll all be worth every single penny. Number 11, we've got Georgia here. They have the best win in the country. They went into Austin and crushed Texas by 15. Everyone who saw Georgia's schedule before the year started knew that they'd lose some games. Like, it's a really tough schedule. It continues on Saturday. They've got to play Tennessee. At least this game's at home after having to play at Alabama, at Texas, and at Ole Miss. Like, those are 3 of the 12 best teams in the country, having to play all 3 of them on the road is not an easy schedule, to say the least. This is still a good team. They're still more than capable of winning the whole thing. They're just going to be ranked a little bit lower this year because their schedule's incredibly tough. Big game against Tennessee on Saturday. If they win that one, then they'll shoot right back up the rankings, probably be one of the top 7 or 8 teams in the country. Number 12, I've got SMU right here. Miami's probably going to be in the 12th spot. I don't see the College Football Playoff Committee admitting how wrong they were just 1 week later about Miami, but SMU's best win is against Louisville, just like how Miami's best win is against Louisville. SMU lost by 3 to BYU. That's their one loss. While Miami lost to Georgia Tech, a team that they were double-digit favorites against, a Georgia Tech team that's 6-4 on the year. SMU has the better loss. So I would put them as the 12th seed as opposed to Miami. If you want to put Boise State here, I wouldn't mind that as well, but I do think that SMU's win over BYU is better than SMU's win over Louisville is better than any win that Boise State has. So that is the most correct college football playoff ranking that you're going to hear today. If the College Football Playoff Committee's ranking doesn't match exactly what I just said, then they're wrong, and you shouldn't listen to anything that they say. That's going to do it here on the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to Zach Hicks for hopping on the show. Dan's show is loaded up today. I mean, just so much going on. I mean, at 12:30, we've got Fran for Chilla. We're going to talk a little college basketball. Armando's going to come on at 1 to talk about the NFL. And then at 2:30, Eddie White's coming on to talk a little Pacers. So Dan's show is loaded up today. I've got a great show already planned out for tomorrow. I'm on the air from 10 to noon, so make sure you tune in. Watch on YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to watch over there. You can also watch on my Twitter page at _ Jonathan Smith if you want to check me out over there as well. Thanks for tuning in to the Real Jonathan Smith Show. I'll talk to you again tomorrow from 10 to noon. The Dan Dockett Show comes your way here in 5 minutes.